The cemetery was too quiet for a woman carrying this much noise inside her chest. Lisa Harlow did not cry. Not there. Not in front of the photographers hiding behind the cypress trees. Not in front of the business associates of Nathan's father who had come more to be seen than to feel anything. She stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of her body, her black dress cut with the surgical precision that defined everything she was. Elegant, contained, absolutely devastated on the inside. Nathan Cole, 28 years old. Brain death following an accident on the I-78 West on a Thursday night when he was supposed to be home having dinner with her. His family had donated his organs. Lisa had signed the paperwork alongside his mother because Nathan had always said that was what he wanted, and she had respected that. Even when her own lungs seemed to have lost their purpose. That had been 3 months ago. Now, on an October morning with the sky the color of cold steel over Manhattan, she was back at that same cemetery, not for the anniversary of his death, not for any particular date. She was there because she had received a strange call 2 days prior, from a number she didn't recognize, from a man who said he needed to speak with her about Nathan. She had hung up the first time. The second time she had listened. "My name is Julian Moretti. I received your fiancé's heart, and I needed you to know that it's doing well." Lisa hadn't responded. She had stood staring at her own reflection in the dark window of her office for a long moment, and then said, in a voice that surprised even herself with its steadiness, "The heart doesn't belong to my fiancé anymore. It belongs to you. He no longer exists." And she had hung up again. But here she was, standing before white marble engraved with Nathan's name in gold lettering. And she knew, without needing to turn around, that there was a man standing approximately 6 yards behind her, watching her with the particular patience of someone accustomed to waiting for what he wanted. "You shouldn't have come," she said, without turning around. "Probably not." The voice was low, slightly rough, with an accent that blended American English with something Italian underneath, something old and unhurried. "I came anyway." Lisa finally turned. And the problem, the real problem, the kind she was in absolutely no way prepared to deal with, was that Julian Moretti was extraordinarily beautiful. Not in the soft way Nathan had been handsome, with his easy smile and warm eyes. Moretti was beautiful the way a storm is beautiful. Something you admire from a distance because getting closer is pure madness. 35 years old. Over 6 feet tall. Dark suit, no tie, the first button of his white shirt undone. Dark brown hair, eyes she couldn't quite decide were green or gray, and a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow with the nonchalance of a man who had never bothered to hide his marks. Beside him stood 2 men who were very clearly not personal assistants. "You brought security to a cemetery," she observed. "I bring security everywhere. What a comfortable life." He didn't respond to the sarcasm. He simply watched her, and there was something in that gaze, an attention that was neither predatory nor condescending, but simply complete, as if he were actually seeing her, and not the composed, grieving woman everyone else insisted on looking at. "I didn't come here to disturb you," he said after a moment. "I came because I needed to." "You needed to." Lisa tilted her head slightly. "You'll forgive me, Moretti, but I'm not in the business of curing anyone else's guilt." Something passed across his face. Not offense. Almost respect. "It's not guilt," he said. "It's—" He paused, as if choosing his words with the care of someone unaccustomed to needing them. "It's gratitude, and something I can't properly explain." Lisa crossed her arms. "Try." He looked at Nathan's grave for a second, then looked back at her. "Since the surgery," he said slowly, "I've been having dreams that aren't mine, memories that don't belong to me." A pause. "I understand that sounds insane." "It does," she agreed. "Continue." "There's a woman in those dreams, always with her back turned, in an apartment I've never been to." He didn't look away. I didn't know who she was until I saw a photograph of you in a business publication. And then I knew. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Lisa was a senior architect at one of the largest corporate design firms on the East Coast. She had built her career on the ability to read spaces, structures, what was visibly solid and what was about to collapse. She applied that same ability to the man standing in front of her now. Julian Moretti was not lying. That was what disturbed her. "I don't believe in signs from the universe," she said. "Neither do I. And I don't believe love survives death in romantically convenient ways. I most definitely don't believe that." "Then what exactly do you want from me, Moretti?" He slipped one hand into his pocket. With the other, he made a brief gesture that dismissed both security men beyond their field of vision. It was a small gesture, nearly imperceptible, but Lisa noticed. She also noticed that both men obeyed without hesitating a single second. "Who is this man?" "I don't know what I want," he said, with an honesty that seemed to cost him something. "I only know I needed to find you, to see if you were real." "I'm real," she said, flat. "And now?" "Now I'm wondering if you'd agree to have coffee with me." Lisa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You came to a cemetery to ask me for coffee." "Yes." "Where you are keeping your transplanted heart." "Technically where the heart that used to belong to your fiancé now resides. But I understand the distinction might be sensitive." She stared at him for a long moment. "You have nerve," she said. "Or you are completely without self-awareness. I've been told both over the years. And then, she didn't plan it. It wasn't a conscious decision." Lisa Harlow laughed. It was brief, nearly involuntary, and she suppressed it faster than it came. But it happened. And for the first time in 3 months, the weight inside her chest felt, for exactly 1 second, less absolute. Julian didn't smile, but something in his eyes shifted. The coffee was at an ordinary bakery 2 blocks from the cemetery, which Lisa suspected had been a calculated choice designed to appear uncalculated. The 2 security men remained outside. They ordered coffee. Neither of them touched their cups for a long time. "How did you find out it was Nathan?" "Because the architect in her stand the structure before the hospital does." He wrapped his finger. "But my father has friends everywhere. My father has friends everywhere." Lisa filed that sentence away with the attention she gave to details that seemed small and weren't. "Moretti," she said slowly. "I know that name. Most people do. Vittorio Moretti." Something in his face didn't exactly change, but went quieter, more careful. "He's my father," said Julian. Lisa nodded once, deliberately. Vittorio Moretti. She wasn't naive. She had grown up in the corporate world, had designed offices for people whose names appeared in news stories with subtexts that were never actually printed. She knew, with the precision of someone who knows things they'd rather not, what the Moretti name meant beyond the Manhattan penthouses and the legitimate business empire. "And you came to find me," she said, measuring every word, "knowing that I would know who you are." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I didn't want to start with a lie." Lisa looked at him for a stretch of time long enough to be uncomfortable for any normal person. Julian Moretti showed no discomfort whatsoever. He simply returned her gaze, with that complete attention she had already noticed, as if he had all the time in the world and no need to fill the silence with anything at all. "You're dangerous," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a conclusion. "Yes," he said. "I am. And you think that honesty makes me safer?" "No. But it gives you information. What you do with it is your choice." Lisa looked out the bakery window. The street was full, ordinary people, children, dogs, the world carrying on with the indifference the world has toward personal grief. Then she looked back at the man across from her. Nathan's heart was beating inside that chest. She couldn't stop thinking about it, and she didn't know. And this disturbed her more than anything else, whether what she felt was peace or betrayal. You said you had dreams with memories that aren't yours, she said. Yes. The apartment in those dreams. She hesitated. Did it have an exposed brick wall in the kitchen and a large Boston fern by the front door? Julian Moretti went completely still. Yes, he said, after a second that lasted too long. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something was different in them. No longer the architect calculating structures. Something older, more exhausted, more human. That was his apartment, she said, where we spent weekends. The silence between them was different this time. Not heavy, just present. I'm sorry, said Julian, with a voice that sounded as though he didn't apologize often and was aware of that. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't. But the grief is real regardless. Lisa looked at his hands resting on the table. The hands of a man who had probably done things she preferred not to imagine. The hands of a man who carried Nathan's heart. She couldn't simplify this. There was no possible simplification. Why did you really come find me? She asked again, because there was a question beneath the question that still hadn't been answered. And don't give me the poetic answer. Give me the real one. Julian Moretti looked at her for a long moment. And then, for the first time, he did something she didn't expect. He leaned slightly forward, rested his elbows on the table, and said, in a voice quiet enough to belong only to her, because for 3 months, this is the only place I wanted to be. And I've spent my entire life not knowing what to do with a feeling I can't control. Lisa's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen with the automatism of someone who uses that as armor. A message from her assistant. Meeting in 40 minutes. She stood up, picked up her bag, looked at him. I don't know what to do with that, she said, honestly. Neither do I. So we're both lost. Apparently, he said. And there was something in the way he said it. Not resignation, not irony, but something that was almost, only almost, the beginning of something. That made Lisa pause at the door for a second. She didn't turn around. Moretti. Yes. Next time you want to reach me, she said, her voice perfectly level, don't text from an unknown number. That's the kind of thing that makes a woman think it's a kidnapping. There was a pause. Noted, he said. And Lisa Harlow walked out into the street, into the noise of the city, into the meeting and the blueprints and the life she had rebuilt piece by piece after the loss, carrying with her the absolutely inconvenient certainty that this dangerous, impossible, brutally honest man had said her name, Lisa, with his voice slightly different from how anyone else had said it in the past 3 months, as if she were real, as if it mattered. And on the other side of the city, on the 42nd floor of a building with enough security for a small government, Vittorio Moretti signed documents that sealed his son's future without his son's knowledge. The wedding to Penelope De Luca was scheduled. 11 days remained. Julian Moretti had been shot twice in his life. The first time he was 22, the second 29. He remembered both occasions with the clinical detachment of a man who had long since made peace with the fact that his blood was worth money to certain people. What he was not prepared for, what no amount of scar tissue or cold discipline had equipped him for, was sitting across from his father in the Moretti estate's main study, staring at a wedding contract with his name printed at the top, and feeling something he hadn't felt since he was a child, standing at his mother's funeral. Completely powerless. 11 days, Vittorio said, without looking up from the documents on his desk. At 64, he was still the kind of man who filled a room simply by existing in it, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, with hands that had built an empire and buried 2 rivals. Alfonso De Luca expects the ceremony at his estate in Connecticut. The press release goes out Monday. You could have told me before scheduling a press release, Julian said. I'm telling you now. That's not the same thing. Vittorio finally looked up. His eyes, the same gray-green Julian saw in his own mirror, carried the particular expression of a man who considered patience a luxury he extended only to threats he respected. This marriage, his father said slowly, protects 400 families who work under this name. It closes a territory dispute that has already cost us 3 men this year. He set down his pen. You will marry Penelope DeLuca, and you will do it with the composure this family requires. Julian said nothing. In the silence, his phone buzzed once against his jacket pocket. He didn't reach for it. But he knew, with a certainty that had no rational foundation, and that bothered him deeply precisely because of that it was her. It was not her. It was his cousin and underboss, Marco Ricci, 29 years old and constitutionally incapable of delivering bad news without also delivering it loudly. The message read, "We have a problem." The DeLuca's youngest, Penelope, gave an interview to a lifestyle magazine. Quote, "I've always wanted a man who would let me redecorate his home and his personality. I'm sending you the link. I'm also sending prayers." Julian stared at the screen for 4 seconds. Then he typed back, "Burn the magazine." Marco responded with a fire emoji and a skull. Lisa Harlow's office occupied the 21st floor of a glass building in Midtown, and it looked exactly like her. Precise, uncluttered, every line intentional. The drafting table by the window was covered in blueprints for a hotel renovation in Chicago, and she had been staring at the same structural detail for 40 minutes without seeing it. She was thinking about a scar above a left eyebrow. She was furious at herself for thinking about it. Her business partner and closest friend, Diana Voss, 34, dropped a coffee on Lisa's desk with the gentle aggression of someone who had known her long enough to diagnose the problem without asking. "You have the face," Diana said. "I don't have a face. The face you make when something happened that you're refusing to process." Diana sat across from her. "Last time you had that face was the night before Nathan's funeral when you reorganized the entire supply closet at 11 p.m. The supply closet needed reorganizing." Lisa. Lisa set down her pencil, looked at Diana. And because Diana was one of approximately 2 people on Earth she trusted completely, she told her. All of it. The phone call, the cemetery, the bakery, the exposed brick wall, the way he had said I've spent my entire life not knowing what to do with a feeling I can't control, with the absolute steadiness of a man making a factual statement. Diana listened without interrupting, which was how Lisa knew she was taking it seriously. When she finished, Diana was quiet for a moment. "Julian Moretti," she said. "Yes." "As in Vittorio Moretti's son?" "Yes." "Lisa." Diana's voice was careful. "That family doesn't exist in the same world we exist in." "I know that." "Do you? Because the face you're making right now is not the face of someone who knows that." Lisa picked up her pencil again, set it back down. "He was honest with me," she said, "about who he is, about the danger. That's not reassuring. That's a man telling you the fire is hot while holding a match." "I know. So you're going to stay away from him." Lisa looked out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere across that city, Nathan's heart was beating inside a stranger's chest. A stranger who dreamed of an apartment with exposed brick and a Boston fern. A stranger who had come to a cemetery because he needed to, which was, she understood now, possibly the most Julian Moretti thing he could have said. "Yes," she said, "of course I am." Diana looked at her for a long moment. "You're absolutely going to see him again, aren't you?" Lisa said nothing. Diana took a long sip of her coffee. "I'll keep my phone on," she said. The call came at 9 p.m. Not from Julian. From a number she didn't recognize, different from the first one. And this time, the voice on the other end wasn't low and Italian-edged and careful. It was a woman, young, slightly breathless. "Miss Harlow? Who is this?" "My name is Penelope DeLuca." A pause, filled with the specific energy of someone who had rehearsed an opening and immediately abandoned it. "I know this is strange. I got your number from... It doesn't matter how I got it. I need to talk to you about Julian Moretti." Lisa sat very still on her couch. "I know he came to see you," Penelope continued. "I have people who watch him. My father's people, technically, but that's… Look, I'm not calling to cause trouble. I'm calling because I think you and I might want the same thing." "And what thing is that?" Lisa said carefully. The pause that followed was long enough to be genuine. "For neither of us to be trapped," Penelope said quietly. "In something neither of us chose." Julian found out about the call at 11 p.m. when Marco sent him a 2-word message. Penelope moved. He was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of his apartment, a glass of scotch untouched in his hand, looking at the city in the way he had looked at it for years, like a board, like a structure of power and territory and calculated distance. Tonight, it looked different. He pressed 2 fingers to the left side of his chest. A habit he'd developed since the surgery, unconscious and slightly infuriating. The scar was long, clean, professional. Beneath it, something beat with a steadiness that still sometimes surprised him. He thought about exposed brick, a Boston fern, a woman who laughed at a cemetery and then immediately punished herself for it. His phone rang. His head of security, Vincent Caruso, 51, former military, the only man Julian trusted without conditions. "She met with Penelope DeLuca," Vincent said. No preamble. He never used preamble. Julian's jaw tightened slightly. "When?" "Phone call, 9 p.m., 22 minutes. "Content?" "Unknown." Penelope used a clean line. Julian set down the scotch glass. Penelope DeLuca was many things. 24 years old, impulsive, raised in silk and stubbornness, wildly unsuited to the role her father had designed for her. She was not, however, stupid. If she had reached out to Lisa, she had a reason. And reasons in Julian's world were never simple. "I want to know what was said," Julian told Vincent. "And I want to know who gave Penelope access to Lisa Harlow's private number." "Understood. Tonight, Vincent." He hung up. Stood there in the dark of his apartment, city lights cutting across the floor, the weight of 11 days pressing against the back of his skull like something with teeth. His phone buzzed one more time. A message from a number he had saved under no name, just a single initial, L. "Next time you want information about me, you could simply ask. It's faster. L." Julian looked at the message for a long moment. Then, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he almost smiled. He typed back, "Noted. Are you all right?" 3 minutes passed. "I've had stranger evenings. Good night, Moretti." He set the phone down on the windowsill. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual indifferent noise. 11 days. And somewhere in this city, 2 women had just spoken on the phone, which meant the situation had officially moved from complicated to something that required a different category of word entirely. Julian picked up the scotch, drank it, 10 days and counting. Penelope DeLuca was not what Lisa expected. She had expected, based on everything Julian's name implied, based on the world those families occupied, someone polished into a weapon, cold, calculated. The kind of woman who wore power like a second skin and apologized for nothing. What walked into the coffee shop on West 46th Street at 8:30 in the morning was a 24-year-old in an oversized camel coat, dark hair pulled into a messy knot, sunglasses pushed up on her head despite the gray October sky, carrying a tote bag with a broken strap that she kept shifting from shoulder to shoulder with increasing irritation. She spotted Lisa immediately. Dropped into the seat across from her with the energy of someone who had been rehearsing this conversation all night and was now running entirely on espresso and nerve. "You're more intimidating in person," Penelope said. "Good morning," Lisa said. "Right. Sorry. Good morning." She flagged down a server with the confidence of someone raised in rooms where people came to her. "Double espresso, please. Actually, make it a triple." She looked at Lisa. "Do you want anything?" "I already have coffee." "Of course you do. You seem like someone who's always already prepared." Penelope pulled off her sunglasses and set them on the table. Her eyes were dark brown and sharper than her entrance had suggested. "I'll get to the point. Please. I don't want to marry Julian Moretti." Lisa wrapped both hands around her cup. "That seems like a conversation to have with Julian Moretti." "I've tried. He listens very politely, and then nothing changes, which I've learned is his version of a wall." Penelope accepted her espresso, drank half of it in one go. "My father and his father made this agreement 2 years ago. I was 22. Nobody asked me. I found out at a family dinner between the pasta course and the main." "That's—" Lisa paused. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be useful." Penelope leaned forward. "You're the variable nobody planned for. Julian came to find you, which means something shifted in him. I don't know what, and honestly, I don't need to know the details. But I know that man well enough to understand that he doesn't do anything without a reason." Lisa said nothing. "I'm not asking you to break up an engagement," Penelope continued. "I'm asking you to help me find a way out of a contract that treats me like a merger clause." She paused. "And maybe, in the process, give Julian an actual reason to push back against his father." The coffee shop hummed around them. Ordinary Tuesday morning sounds. Somewhere outside, a cab honked twice. "You're asking me to involve myself in something that could get people hurt," Lisa said, quietly but clearly. Penelope met her eyes. And for a moment, the impulsive young woman with the broken tote bag strap disappeared, and something older and much more serious looked out from behind those dark eyes. "People are already getting hurt," she said. "The only question is which people, and whether they had any say in it." Julian knew about the meeting before it ended. Vincent had texted him the coffee shop name at 8:34 a.m. with a single additional word: together. He sat with that information through 2 conference calls and a meeting with the family's legal team that he participated in with exactly enough attention to be functional, and spent the rest of it thinking about what Penelope was smart enough to say and what Lisa was careful enough not to agree to. By noon, Marco was in his office, sitting backwards on a chair with the casual disregard for furniture that had defined him since childhood. "So," Marco said, "your almost fiancé is having secret coffee with the woman whose dead fiancé's heart you're currently using." He tilted his head. "How's your morning going? Close the door on your way out." "I'm already inside. That doesn't apply." Marco leaned his chin on the back of the chair. "Julian, talk to me." Julian looked at him. Marco Ricci was the closest thing he had to a person who told him the truth without packaging it first. They had grown up in the same house for 3 years after Marco's father, Julian's uncle, died, and that particular shared history created a shortcut between them that bypassed most social filters. "The De Luca agreement," Julian said. "How solid is it legally?" Marco's eyebrows rose. "You're asking about exits. I'm asking about the structure." "The structure," Marco straightened slightly, "is that your father and Alfonso De Luca signed something that our legal team describes as aggressively binding. Breaking it unilaterally creates a territory conflict that goes back to a dispute from 2019 that we technically resolved, but actually just paused. And if both parties agreed to dissolve it, then it's a different conversation." Marco studied him. "But Alfonso De Luca isn't going to agree to dissolve anything unless he gets something worth more than the alliance. And your father, Julian, your father built this agreement. It's not just strategy for him, it's legacy." Julian turned to the window. The city below moved with its usual density, indifferent and constant. "Penelope doesn't want this marriage," he said. "Penelope wants a lot of things her father doesn't know about. That doesn't make her once relevant in our world, and you know that." "It should." Marco was quiet for a moment. "Since when?" he asked, and his voice was careful in the way it only got when he was taking something seriously. Julian didn't answer. He pressed 2 fingers to his chest. That habit again, unconscious, infuriating, and thought about a woman who had laughed at a cemetery and immediately hated herself for it. Find me everything on the 2019 territory dispute, he said finally. Every detail. And find me what Alfonso De Luca wants that he doesn't currently have. Marco stood up slowly. You're going to try to build him an exit that costs your father nothing. I'm going to try to build everyone an exit that costs the fewest people possible. That's... His cousin paused. That's not how this world works, Julian. I know how this world works. He turned from the window. I'm asking how it could work. Lisa was at her drafting table at 7 p.m. when the knock came at her office door. Not a call, not a text from an initial, an actual knock, which meant he had come in person, which meant he had walked past her assistant's empty desk after hours, which meant the building security had either let him through or, more likely, hadn't been given a choice. Your building has 4 cameras in the lobby, Julian said as he opened the door. None of them were pointing at the right angle. I'll mention that to management, Lisa said, without looking up from the blueprint. Did you know about the meeting this morning? Yes. How? I have people who watch things. Apparently everyone in your world has people who watch things. She set down her pencil and looked at him. He was still in the suit from whatever his day had been. Jacket gone, sleeves rolled to the forearm, which she refused to find relevant. Penelope called me. I met her. She's not what I expected. She rarely is. She doesn't want to marry you. I know. Do you want to marry her? The question sat in the air between them, direct and deliberately uncomfortable. Julian walked further into the office, looked at the blueprints on her desk with the focused attention he seemed to give everything, and then looked at her. No, he said, simply, without apology. Then why? Because in my family, what I want has historically been the least relevant variable in any equation. Lisa studied him. The city threw light through the glass wall behind him, cutting long shadows across the floor. That's the saddest thing you've said so far, she said. And you said it like a weather report. Something shifted at the edge of his expression. Not quite humor. Not quite pain. I came to tell you something, he said. Then tell me. There's a man in my father's circle who knows you met with Penelope this morning. He will tell Alfonso De Luca within 24 hours. His voice stayed level, but his eyes didn't. When that happens, you will become a variable that Alfonso considers a threat to his agreement. And Alfonso De Luca does not leave variables unaddressed. The room was very quiet. Are you warning me? Lisa said slowly. Or are you telling me you can't protect me? I'm telling you, Julian said, that I will not let anything happen to you. But I need you to understand the weight of what you've stepped into, because you stepped in it with your eyes open and you deserve the same honesty in return. Lisa held his gaze for a long moment. 6 months ago, she said, my biggest professional problem was a contractor in Chicago who couldn't read a blueprint. She paused. I'd like to go back to that. I know, but I can't. No, he said quietly. I don't think you can. She nodded once, picked up her pencil. Set it back down. Moretti. Yes. If you're going to be responsible for turning my life into something dangerous, she said, with perfect composure, the least you can do is sit down. He looked at the chair across from her desk, looked at her, and Julian Moretti, underboss of the Moretti family, a man who had faced 2 bullets and a federal investigation without blinking, sat down. Outside, the city carried on. 9 days remained. And somewhere across Manhattan, a man picked up a phone to make a call that would change everything by morning. The call Alfonso De Luca made that night lasted 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Vincent had intercepted the metadata by midnight. Julian had the summary on his phone by 12:08 a.m., sitting at his kitchen counter in the dark, reading 3 lines that rearranged the next 9 days into something considerably more dangerous than a wedding. Alfonso knew about Lisa. Not just that she existed, he knew her firm, her address, her connection to Nathan Cole, and the precise number of times Julian had made contact with her. Someone inside the Moretti circle had been feeding information outward for longer than this week. The meeting at the cemetery hadn't been a leak. It had been a report. Julian set down his phone, pressed 2 fingers to his chest. Thought, with the cold clarity that danger always produced in him, that the person who had given Alfonso that information had access to his schedule, his movements, and his father's trust, which narrowed the list considerably, and made the next conversation he needed to have one of the worst of his life. He picked the phone back up and called Vincent. "I need the internal logs from the last 60 days, he said. "Everyone with access to my calendar. Cross-reference with any communication to DeLuca territory." A pause. "And Vincent, do it without telling my father." Silence on the other end. Then, "Understood." Lisa found out at 7 a.m. Not from Julian, from Diana, who arrived at Lisa's apartment with 2 coffees and the expression of someone who had not slept and was not going to soften what came next. "There are 2 men sitting in a car outside your building," Diana said, stepping inside. "Dark sedan, Connecticut plates. They were there when I arrived." Lisa accepted the coffee, walked to her window, looked down. The sedan was there. "How long?" she asked. "Building super noticed them around 5 a.m. Diana turned to face her. "Lisa, this is not a situation where I get to say I told you so, because I already told you so, which means we've moved past that part and into the part where you tell me what we're doing." Lisa looked at the car for another moment. Then she picked up her phone and typed, "There's a sedan outside my building. Connecticut plates. I assume you already know." The response came in under a minute. "Yes. Don't leave yet. I'm handling it." Diana read over her shoulder. "He's handling it." She said it the way someone says something they find both alarming and against their better judgment, slightly reassuring. "What does that mean in his world?" "I genuinely don't know," Lisa said. "And I think that's the part I should be more concerned about." "You think?" Lisa set the phone down and looked at her apartment. The exposed brick in the kitchen. The Boston fern by the door that she had kept alive through 3 months of grief with the stubborn, irrational conviction that letting it die would be one loss too many. She thought about Nathan. About the fact that the man handling the armed vehicle outside her building was walking around with Nathan's heart inside his chest. About the fact that this had somehow become her life on a Tuesday. "I'm not running," she said. Diana stared at her. "I'm not," Lisa repeated. "If I run, I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder at something I didn't choose and can't control. That's not how I'm built." "You're an architect, Lisa. Not a whatever he is." "I know what I am." She picked up her coffee. "Which is why I'm calling his terms, not his." Julian arrived at 40 minutes past 8. No sedan following him. No Marco. Just Vincent, who remained at the elevator, and Julian himself, who knocked twice and waited, which Lisa had begun to understand was its own form of respect from a man who could have simply not knocked at all. She opened the door. He looked like someone who had not slept, which on him manifested as a very slight tightening around the eyes, and nothing else. Immaculate suit, jaw set. He glanced once at Diana, who was sitting at Lisa's kitchen counter with her coffee, and the specific expression of a woman conducting a silent threat assessment. "Diana Voss," Lisa said. "My partner, she stays." "Fine," Julian said without hesitation, which visibly surprised Diana. He came inside, stood rather than sat, which Lisa had noticed was what he did when he was managing something internally. "The men outside are Alfonso's," he said. "They're watching, not moving. For now." "For now," Lisa repeated. "Alfonso knows you met with Penelope. He's read it as interference in the agreement." Julian's voice was even. "He's not going to move openly against you. That would create a conflict he's not ready for. But he will apply pressure through proximity, make you uncomfortable enough to remove yourself as a factor." "That's a very civilized way to describe intimidation," Diana said from the counter. Julian looked at her. It is intimidation. I'm not going to call it something else. Diana blinked, set down her coffee, looked at Lisa with an expression that said, involuntarily, all right, I see it. What's the actual threat level? Lisa asked. Low, as long as I'm visible. He paused. Which creates its own complications, meaning your father will know you're here. My father already knows more than I've told him. Someone in my circle has been reporting to DeLuca. Something moved behind his eyes, controlled anger, the kind that had been compressed until it was structural. I don't have the name yet. When I do, that situation will be resolved. The way he said resolved left no ambiguity about what it meant and no room to ask follow-up questions. Lisa didn't ask any. She understood that there were edges to his world that honesty could acknowledge without detail, and that was the precise line he was walking with her. You have a traitor, she said. Yes. And a wedding in 9 days. Yes. And a woman who doesn't want to marry you. Also, yes. And now me. She crossed her arms. I'm a significant amount of your problems right now, Moretti. You're not a problem, he said. And the flatness of it, no softening, no romance, just a statement of fact delivered like load-bearing information, was somehow more affecting than anything careful would have been. Diana made a very small sound from the kitchen that she immediately converted into a cough. Lisa ignored her heroically. What do you need from me? She asked. Julian looked at her for a moment. This, she had learned, was what he did before saying something that cost him something. I need you to trust me for a few days, he said. Not blindly. I'll tell you what I can, when I can. But I need you to not make moves without telling me first, because in this situation, unpredictability gets people hurt. And in exchange, I find you a way out of this that doesn't require you to disappear from your own life. Lisa held his gaze. Across the kitchen, Diana was very carefully not saying anything, which was the loudest possible way of saying something. One condition, Lisa said. Name it. Penelope DeLuca doesn't get used as a pawn in whatever you're building. She came to me in good faith. Whatever exit you're engineering, she gets a real one. Something in Julian's face shifted. Not surprise, more like recognition, as if she had said something he had already decided and hadn't expected anyone else to arrive at independently. That was already the plan, he said quietly. Good. Lisa uncrossed her arms. Then we have an arrangement. She extended her hand. Julian looked at it for exactly 1 second, and she had the distinct impression that handshakes were not the customary way agreements were sealed in his world. Before he took it, his hand was warm, steady, the grip of someone who meant what he said. She let go first. Now, she said, moving toward her kitchen with the efficiency of someone who processed difficulty by doing things. Do you want coffee, or does your lifestyle require something more dramatic in the mornings? Julian stared at her. Diana pressed her lips together very hard. Coffee, he said after a beat. Black. Naturally, Lisa said. And Diana Voss, who had known Lisa Harlow for 11 years, and through the worst grief of her life, watched her best friend move around the kitchen with something in her posture that hadn't been there in 3 months. Not happiness. Not yet. But something that was adjacent to it. Something that looked from the right angle, like a woman who had remembered that she was still alive. The trader's name arrived at noon. Vincent's message to Julian was 4 words. It's Carmine. Confirm action. Julian was still at Lisa's building, 1 floor down, in his car, managing the 12 other things the morning had produced, when he read it. Carmine Russo, 38, 14 years in the Moretti organization, his father's personal driver for 6 of them. Julian sat with the information for 30 seconds. Then he typed back 2 words. Bring him in. He put the phone in his pocket. Looked up at the building. Thought about black coffee and a Boston fern, and a woman who charged conditions like she had every right to, which he had decided somewhere between the cemetery and this morning, she absolutely did. 9 days. The wedding was still on the calendar. The traitor was about to be brought in, and Alfonso de Luca's sedan sat at the curb below, patient and cold, waiting for a version of events that Julian Moretti had already decided would not come to pass. Carmine Russo cried. Julian had expected many things from a man who had spent 14 years inside the Moretti organization and then quietly sold pieces of it to the highest bidder. He had expected anger, deflection, negotiation. He had not expected tears, which arrived approximately 4 minutes into the conversation and did not stop. Julian sat across from him in the basement room of a property in Red Hook that appeared on no document connected to his name, and listened to the full account with the stillness of a man who had learned long ago that patience extracted more truth than pressure. The story was not complicated. It rarely was. Carmine had a daughter, 21, accepted to a graduate program in London, and Alfonso de Luca had offered to fund her education, her housing, her future, in exchange for information. No violence required. Just reports, small ones at first, then larger. How long? Julian said. 14 months, Carmine said, not looking up. 14 months. Which meant Alfonso had known about Julian's surgery almost from the beginning, had tracked his recovery, his movements, the precise moment he'd reached out to the Cole family to find the donor's identity. Had known about Lisa before Julian had understood what finding her meant. The room was very quiet. Your daughter, Julian said. She takes the program in London. That doesn't change. Carmine finally looked up. His eyes were red, confused. The debt you created, Julian continued, is yours, not hers. She's 21, and she wanted an education. He stood. Vincent will discuss what comes next with you. I won't be part of that conversation. He walked out. In the hallway, Marco was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and an expression that was more serious than his default setting. 14 months, Marco said quietly. Yes. Which means the wedding agreement. Marco's jaw tightened. Alfonso didn't propose that alliance because he wanted the territory consolidation. He proposed it because he already knew you were sick. He was positioning for a merger before you were even out of surgery. Julian had arrived at the same conclusion in the basement, somewhere between the 3rd and 4th minute of Carmine's account. Alfonso de Luca had not built an empire by being sentimental. He had identified a weakened position and moved to absorb it, wrapped in the language of alliance and family. He expected me to die, Julian said, or to come out of it diminished enough that the marriage would make his family the dominant structure in the agreement. And instead you came out of it. Marco looked at him carefully, going to cemeteries and drinking coffee with architects. Don't. I'm not making a joke. Marco straightened. Julian, if Alfonso believes Lisa is the reason you're reconsidering the agreement, she isn't just a variable to him anymore. She's a lever, and people use levers. The word landed exactly as intended. I know, Julian said. Do you have a plan? I have the beginning of one. That's less reassuring than you think it is. Marco. Julian looked at him. Trust me for 72 hours. His cousin held his gaze for a long moment, then exhaled. 72 hours. Then I start asking questions loudly and in front of your father. Lisa was on a video call with the Chicago contractor when the second envelope arrived. Her assistant Priya brought it in without a word, set it on the corner of the desk, and retreated with the specific silence of someone who had seen the building security footage from that morning and drawn her own conclusions. Lisa finished the call, ended it, and opened the envelope. No letter inside, just a photograph. Her, leaving her building that morning. Timestamp, 6:47 a.m. before Diana arrived, before she had known anyone was watching. She set it face down on the desk. Then she picked up her phone. Someone sent me a photograph, she said when Julian answered, of me leaving my building this morning. No note, just the image. A pause, short but dense. Are you at your office? Yes. Stay there. Don't go to the lobby. His voice had shifted into something she hadn't heard before. Not cold, but compressed, every word stripped to its load-bearing function. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Moretti. She kept her own voice level by conscious effort. I need you to tell me honestly what I'm dealing with. Alfonso De Luca is reminding you that he can see you. It's pressure, not action. What's the difference? Action would not have come with a photograph. She absorbed that. That's meant to be comforting? It's meant to be accurate. A beat. Lisa, I need you to hold on for 2 days. I have something in motion. If it works, the agreement dissolves without a war. If it doesn't. He paused, and in that pause was the entire weight of what he hadn't yet said. I will find another way. And if there isn't one? He was quiet for long enough that the silence became its own answer. There is one, he said finally. I haven't built it yet. She looked at the upside-down photograph on her desk, thought about Nathan, who had been uncomplicated and warm and present in all the ways that made grief simple and enormous. Thought about the absolute inconvenience of standing at the edge of something with a man who was neither simple nor warm, and was somehow, inexplicably, exactly as present. 20 minutes, she said. I'll be here. He arrived in 18. Diana had gone to a client meeting. Priya had been sent home early. The office was quiet in the way that large glass spaces are quiet, full of ambient city sound that somehow emphasized the absence of people. Julian came in, looked at the photograph, looked at her, and said nothing for a moment. He's done this before, Lisa said. To other people. Yes. And those people made different choices than I'm going to make. He set the photograph back down. Alfonso relies on the fact that people in my world accept a certain cost as standard. I'm going to offer him something that reframes the calculation entirely. What? He looked at her directly. His son. Lisa blinked. He has a son? Rafael De Luca, 27. For the last 3 years he's been trying to exit his father's world quietly. Law degree, legitimate firm in Boston. A life Alfonso pretends not to know about because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging that his heir doesn't want his inheritance. Julian pulled out a chair and finally sat, which she had learned meant he was prepared to say something that required grounding. If I give Alfonso a pathway to legitimize Rafael's position, to transition structure and power in a way that protects the family's assets without the criminal exposure, he gets more than a marriage alliance ever offered him. He gets a future his son can actually occupy. Lisa studied him. You spent the night building an exit for a man who just sent a threatening photograph to my office. I spent the night building an exit that protects the most people possible, including Penelope. Including Penelope. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you need? I need 48 hours and a meeting with Alfonso that doesn't go through my father yet. Penelope can set that up. Alfonso won't refuse his daughter a conversation. She'll do it, Lisa said. She already wants out badly enough. I know. He looked at her. When this is over, don't. He stopped. Don't tell me what happens when it's over, she said carefully, like someone handling something fragile that was also somehow sharp. Not yet. Build the thing first. Then we can talk about what's on the other side of it. Julian held her gaze. And in his expression was something she was beginning to recognize. The look of a man who was accustomed to controlling every room he entered, discovering that this particular room had different architecture than anything he'd encountered before, and choosing to stay in it anyway. Fair enough, he said quietly. Outside, the city moved through its afternoon. Cabs and pedestrians and the indifferent machinery of New York in October, carrying on around the small, charged stillness of two people sitting across from each other in a glass office, 48 hours from something that could go several different ways. Lisa's phone lit up. A message from Penelope. Tell me what you need. I'm ready. She turned the screen toward Julian without comment. He read it, looked up. 2 days, he said. 2 days, she confirmed. And somewhere across the city, in a Connecticut estate with a view of the Sound, Alfonso de Luca poured himself a scotch and waited, patient, certain, entirely unaware that the architecture of his plan had already begun to shift beneath him. The meeting with Alfonso de Luca happened on a Thursday morning at a restaurant in Greenwich that he owned through 3 layers of shell companies and considered neutral ground. Julian arrived first. That was intentional. He sat at the corner table with his back to the wall, always, in every room, without exception, and watched Alfonso walk in at precisely 9 a.m., with 2 men flanking him, and the particular expression of someone who believed they were attending a negotiation they had already won. Alfonso de Luca was 67 years old, silver-haired, broad in the way of men who had once been physically imposing, and were now simply large with authority. He sat across from Julian with the unhurried confidence of a patriarch, and said nothing, waiting for Julian to speak first. Julian let the silence run for 10 full seconds. Then he placed a single folder on the table and slid it across. Raphael's firm had a clean audit last year, Julian said. 31 active clients, legitimate revenue, a practice that could absorb a structured transition of 3 of your cleanest business assets within 18 months without attracting attention. He nodded toward the folder. The legal architecture is already drafted. My team worked through the night. Alfonso did not open the folder. He looked at Julian with the careful attention of a man recalibrating. You came to offer me an exit strategy, Alfonso said. I came to offer your son a future you've been pretending he doesn't want. Julian kept his voice even. And to offer you a legacy that survives the next decade without federal exposure. The climate isn't what it was, Alfonso. You know that better than I do. A long silence. And the marriage agreement, Alfonso said, dissolves, mutually, with a joint statement about families choosing different paths forward. Julian met his eyes. No territory conflict, no insult to either name. Clean. You've thought about this carefully. I have. Why? Alfonso's voice was genuinely curious, which was more dangerous than his anger. You gain nothing from this. You release an alliance your father built. You hand me a transition I didn't ask for. He tilted his head. What does Julian Moretti get from this arrangement? Julian looked at him steadily. The right to make a choice, he said, which I intend to use. Alfonso studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he opened the folder. Vittorio Moretti found out at noon. Julian told him himself, which was the only way it could have happened, and also the hardest conversation of his adult life. He sat across from his father in the same study where the wedding contract had been presented, in the same chair, and laid out the complete architecture of what he had built over the previous 48 hours. Vittorio listened without interrupting. That, Julian knew, was not patience. It was the particular stillness of a man deciding whether what he was hearing was a betrayal or something more complex. When Julian finished, the study was very quiet. You did this without telling me, Vittorio said. Yes. You went around me, to Alfonso directly. Yes. And Carmine Russo has been removed from the organization. The decision about consequences was handled through Vincent, not me. His daughter's education stands. She had no knowledge of what her father did. Vittorio was silent for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, the same window Julian had stood at 100 times, looking at the same city, feeling the same weight of the name they shared. This woman, Vittorio said without turning. The architect. Her name is Lisa Harlow. I know her name. A pause. I know whose heart you carry, Julian. I know why you found her. His voice was not cold. It was something more difficult. The voice of a man confronting something he hadn't planned for. I built the agreement with Alfonso because I was afraid. The admission landed quietly, without drama. You were on that table, and I didn't know if you would come off it the same. And I needed the structure to hold. Julian looked at his father's back. It held, Julian said, and now it can be rebuilt differently. Vittorio turned. And in his face was something Julian had not seen in many years. Not the patriarch, not the architect of power, but the man underneath all of it, who had stood at his son's hospital bed and made decisions from a place of fear rather than strategy. Alfonso accepted the terms, he asked. He's reviewing the folder with his lawyers today. He'll confirm by tonight. And Penelope? Penelope has a life she's been trying to build for 2 years. It's time to let her build it. His father looked at him for a long time. Then he walked back to his desk, sat down, picked up his pen. You have your mother's stubbornness, he said. It was not a criticism. I know. And her judgment. Vittorio looked up once. Don't waste it. Lisa was at the Boston Fern when Julian knocked. She had been watering it, a Thursday evening ritual she had maintained since Nathan's death, the stubborn continuation of ordinary life. When she heard the knock and knew without checking who it was. She opened the door. He was not in a suit. Dark jacket, dark shirt, open at the collar. The closest to informal she had seen him, which was still considerably more composed than most people at their most formal. He looked like a man who had just come through something and was still deciding what he was on the other side of it. Alfonso confirmed, he said. I know. Penelope texted me 17 exclamation points and a string of emojis that I think expressed relief. Something almost crossed his face. The agreement is formally dissolved. Joint statement goes out Monday. He paused. My father knows about you. How did he take it? Better than I expected. Which, for my father, means he said 3 true things and then picked up his pen. Lisa looked at him in the doorway. The city moved behind him through the open hallway window, the same indifferent, constant city, entirely unaware that several people's lives had just shifted on a Thursday evening. Come in, she said. He did. He looked at the apartment the way she imagined he'd dreamed it. The exposed brick in the kitchen, the fern by the door, the specific quality of the evening light through the west-facing windows. And she watched him look at it. This man who carried a piece of Nathan inside his chest, standing in the space where Nathan had been real and present and alive, and she waited for the grief to close over her completely. It didn't. It was there. It would always be there. She understood that. It was part of her architecture now. But it was not the only thing in the room. Are you all right? Julian asked, watching her. I'm thinking, she said. About the fact that 3 months ago I was a person with a straightforward life and a clean grief, and no armed sedans outside my building. I'm aware I've complicated things. You have. She set down the watering can. You've also been honest with me every single time, which in my experience is rarer than the sedans. He looked at her steadily. I need to tell you something, he said. Then tell me. I don't know how to do this. The admission came without apology, without softening, just the plain fact of it from a man who was precise about everything else. I've spent my entire adult life in a world where feelings are leverage or weakness. I don't have a framework for whatever this is. Lisa considered him. The scar above his eyebrow. The eyes that couldn't decide between gray and green. The man who had built an exit strategy for his enemies to protect a woman he had met at a cemetery over coffee. Neither of them drank. Neither do I, she said. Nathan was my framework. I built everything around knowing exactly what I had. She paused. I don't know what this is either. I just know it's real. And I know I'm done pretending it isn't because it's inconvenient. Julian crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and stopped close enough that she could see the slight irregularity in his breathing. Controlled, but not perfectly. I'm not asking you to be certain, he said quietly. I'm asking if you're willing to find out. Lisa looked up at him. Thought about Nathan, who would have liked this man's honesty and distrusted his world, and ultimately, she believed, would have recognized someone who meant what he said. Thought about watering a fern for 3 months because letting things die was not something she knew how to accept. I have conditions, she said. I know. You haven't heard them yet. I know that too. The edge of something moved in his expression. Name them. Honesty. Always. Not managed truth. Real truth. Yes. Diana gets a full explanation. She's involved now, and she deserves it. Agreed. And you learn how to drink your coffee with something in it occasionally. Black. Every single time is a personality statement I'm not prepared to endorse indefinitely. Julian stared at her. The silence lasted 4 seconds. And then Julian Moretti, who had faced federal investigations and rival families and 2 separate bullets without any visible disruption to his composure, laughed. A real one. Short, genuine, slightly rusty from disuse, like something that hadn't been taken out in a long time and needed a moment to remember how it worked. Lisa felt it land somewhere in the middle of her chest and stay there. "I'll consider the coffee," he said. "That's all I ask." He raised one hand and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the careful deliberateness of a man handling something he intended to take care of. She let him. The city made its noise outside. The fern stood by the door, alive and improbably well. "Lisa," he said. "Yes. Thank you for trusting me when you had every reason not to." She held his gaze. "Don't make me regret it." "That," he said quietly, "is the one promise I can make without conditions." 3 weeks later, a small item appeared in a business publication. The Moretti and DeLuca families have announced the mutual dissolution of a joint business agreement, citing evolving strategic priorities. Both families expressed appreciation for the partnership and wished each other continued success. Diana read it over breakfast and sent Lisa a single message. Evolving strategic priorities. "I cannot believe this is your life now." Lisa replied with a photograph. Her office window, the Manhattan skyline, and on the corner of her drafting table, a single coffee cup. Not black, something with enough cream in it to be visible. Diana's response was immediate. "He put something in the coffee." "Working on it," Lisa wrote back. She set down her phone, picked up her pencil. Outside, the city moved through another ordinary morning, full of extraordinary things, dressed as nothing in particular. Somewhere in that city, a heart beat steadily, and for the first time in a long time, it did not feel like a loss. It felt like a beginning.